Evolution. At its simplest definition, evolution is change over time. In biology, it's change at the population level rather than the individual level, and it happens over a very long period of time. So if we're expanding that definition, we could say gradual change of living things through time. Evolution is often referred to as the unifying theme of biology because it gives us a way to take a meaningful look at themes of unity and diversity of life. In this section, we'll look at some evidence of evolution or change of living things over time. And again, evolution is all the changes that have occurred in living organisms due to differential reproductive success over geological time. Differential reproductive success just means that some organisms reproduce more than others because they are better suited to their environment. First, we'll look at anatomical evidence. Common descent offers explanation for anatomical similarities and differences among organisms. We have three different structures we need to define. We have homologous structures, analogous structures, and vestigial structures. Homologous structure, we see that homo, root word meaning same, they have the same function, the same basic structure, and indicate a common ancestor. So for example, the human arm and the whale forelimb all have similar structure. We'll look at some other examples of this momentarily. Analogous structures, if you think of an analogy, they have the same basic function, but they have different origins. So a good example of an analogous structure would be the wing of a bird and the wing of an insect. They both aid the organism in flight, but they originate from different structures. This figure shows homologous structures. So we just mentioned that the forelimb of a human and a whale were homologous structures, but all of these are considered to be homologous structures. We can compare the bone structure here. And so this can indicate common ancestry. And even in comparing these, we can see that some are more similar than others, which may further indicate relatedness. Also related are vestigial structures. These are vestiges of structures that were once fully functional, but now are either significantly reduced in size and or function, and may in fact be non-functional. We have several examples. Snakes don't have use for hind limbs, and yet some have remnants of hind limbs in a pelvic girdle and legs. We see this also with whales, in that some whales have a pelvic girdle. Another example, there are blind cavefish in Mexico that do not have need for eyes. The eyes that they do have are either non-functional or severely reduced than other fish that live outside of the cave where they would have use for eyesight. Looking at that pelvic girdle and vestigial structures of hind limbs in snakes, for comparing our pelvic girdle to that of a snake, and we can see hind limbs. We see this again in whales that have a significantly reduced pelvic girdle and hind limbs that have no obvious function, but may have, at an earlier point in time, have been larger and fully functional. So if we're comparing a human hand and a panda hand, we see that pandas have this false thumb. So we're trying to determine what kind of structure we have here whenever we're looking at relatedness between humans and pandas, and being able to draw some meaningful comparison here. So if we look at the number of digits, we see we have these 5, but the panda has this extra false thumb since it's coming off of these carpal bones. In this case, thumbs have similar functions, still helping to grasp. However, for the panda, this has a different origin. So in this case, the false thumb of a panda would be an analogous structure. Also looking at further evidence of evolution and the relatedness of organisms, and how things have changed over time is the likeness between embryos. If we're looking at vertebrates here and embryology, we're going to note the presence of a post-anal tail. So this is a tail that comes after the anus, right? So in all of these creatures, for the human, chicken, tortoise, salamander, and fish, we can see how that post-anal tail either remains with the animal or via apoptosis is done away with throughout development. We also see the presence of pharyngeal pouches. So here, 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 and here. As this embryo develops, the pharyngeal pouches become gills for the fish, internal, and external gills for the salamander, seen here. And they become other structures for the tortoise, the chicken, and the human. But early in development, the pharyngeal pouches are very similar. There's biochemical evidence of relatedness between organisms. Almost all organisms use the same basic biochemical molecules, including DNA, ATP, and other identical or nearly identical enzymes. Many developmental genes are shared. Use of the same DNA triplet code for the same 20 amino acid sequences indicates the degree of relatedness. Humans share many genes with much simpler organisms. The diversity of life is due to only a slight difference in many of the same genes. A good example of this is cytochrome C, that is represented here. Cytochrome C is a small protein that plays an important role in the electron transport chain within mitochondria of all cells. Keeping in mind that proteins are made of amino acids, we can look at the number of amino acid differences in cytochrome C in these other organisms here compared to human. So if we're looking at the yeast that also has cytochrome C, it has at least 50 amino acid differences in its cytochrome C compared to that of a human. The moth has fewer still with the fish, the turtle, the duck, the pig, and the monkey may have as few as 2 differences. So we can see how these organisms are related on a biochemical level.